Now recording is in progress. The saints are awake. The saints are awake. Okay, so I've started recording now. Excuse me, guys, I'm not home. As you can see my background here, I'm, oh, well, you wouldn't know, You wouldn't know because, yeah, this is a bedroom. I'm not home, therefore, excuse me for all these complications. So, Mfundisi, if you are ready for us, please come through and we can start with the presentation. We'll give the pastor an opportunity to present until he finishes. And then at the end of his presentation, we'll be given a chance to ask questions. Ideally, where he has up until 7:15 to 7:30 to present so that we can have at least 30 minutes for questions and engagement. Mfundisi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening to you, Brother Nomaki. I've known him for many, many years. 4 kids, by the way, 3 girls and 1 boy. I think you know the 2 younger ones we came with the rally. So far, and I know Iko. There are 2 bigger ones, Londi and Otembo. But thank you very much for the introduction and the welcome. And I'm glad that I'm able to be part of this training, taking people through the child protection course. Now, as you have already said, it's a requirement. It's been there in the church for a while that people be taken through a child protection course. Now it has become something that the Youth Ministries Department in the General Conference has made a prerequisite for those who are going to train into, particularly your master guide and your club ministry training, your CMT. You can't get into those without going through a child protection course that's been approved by your conference. What we've done in the SAU is to also say that because your senior youth leaders will also be dealing with people who are under 18, your ambassadors who are 16 and 17. We also want those people who are doing SYL to go through this as well, because the information is going to be helpful. And beyond that, we want everyone to just be aware. We don't want anyone to not know at least the basics when it comes to child protection. If this course is designed to help you get started in your knowledge and understanding of child protection, we want to mainstream it. We want to get to a point where everybody understands the do's and don'ts when you're dealing with children, and in that such that it becomes so normal that we don't fight about it anymore. We don't have arguments about it anymore. We know that we need to protect children. So that's where we are going, and I'm very happy that we've started the process in the SAU. Now we have this child protection course. Now I've chosen to go through the course itself because this is what you're going to receive. And I want to talk about things that are in the course. The option was, of course, to try some fancy PowerPoint, but decided to go through this so that you can see it. And when you ask questions about things that are in the document that you're going to be receiving, because this is what we voted. The graphic people are just working on it now so that we can all have it. So this is what we're dealing with here. And to start out with, the people who are going to need to go through this course: master guides in training, senior youth leaders in training, invested master guides, because you are going to be working with children. Those who have already been invested as SYL, because you're also working with 16 and 17-year-olds in the Ambassador Club. Your staff members, we would like to mainstream it so that everyone who's coming through for a BST get to know this stuff. And then all departmental leaders who are working with children. This is not this is not just going to be limited to youth ministries. We want everybody who's working with children to have an idea of what we're talking about. Now, what's important is this: we don't want people to be passive when it comes to children. We don't want to be passive when it comes to the protection of children, the prevention of abuse. We want to be intentional. We want to be proactive. We want to make sure that we prevent it. Sometimes the church, and legitimately so, has been accused of being reactive. In other words, we've been accused of waiting for things to go wrong and then we respond. That's not the route we want to take. So this is an idea and an attempt to get in front of the whole thing and make sure that our leaders are clear about what we mean when it comes to child protection. Now, when you go through this course, the child protection course, we want you to be aware of how you can identify possible abuse identifiers. Remember, we're not clinically trained to deal with some of these things, but it's good to know some of the things that may make you, see if you can't identify that there might be something going wrong here, and see if you can't get assistance for the child. Be aware of the boundaries and limitations we have as people who work with children and as adults. When in relating to children, just be aware of those limitations. Thirdly, we want you to be aware of the recommended abuse prevention mechanisms that are out there that we can use. And some of them are in the church manual, some of them have been voted by Adventist Risk Management. And so some of them are in the SAU policy on the prevention of abuse for vulnerable people. And we also want you to be aware of the reporting procedures for abuse that are there within the SAU. So this is what we would like you to do. And we want to start out by saying this is not an exhaustive course. It's aimed to just get you started. And then with time, we will get more knowledge. So we would like you to read as much as you possibly can on the abuse of children. We would like you to watch a lot of videos. You can go on YouTube, figure out more things, but we want you to get started in it because it has become very, very important. The SAU policy, now this is not a youth ministries policy, it's an SAU policy that was voted by the executive committee of the SAU on the abuse of prevention of abuse of vulnerable people. Creates a position called the Conference Abuse Prevention Officer. Of course, we even have them in local churches and so on. But this Conference Abuse Prevention Officer is somebody who's there, who's supposed to be making sure that people are aware of what this is and making sure of what child protection is, and also making sure that when these abuse cases happen, that the reporting is done and there's no interference with it. And so we want you to be aware of the broader setup of protection of vulnerable persons, but in our instance of the protection of children, so that we can cooperate with one another to make sure that we make the church a safe space. We want to make the church safe for children. We do. We want to make it safe for all vulnerable people, but particularly for children. And in youth ministries, we work with children. So we have to make it safe. Will it come with certain inconveniences? Yes, but we still want to make it safe. All right, now I'm gonna go there. The first part of the course deals with definitions. And these definitions, remember the SAU covers 4 countries. It covers South Africa, Lesotho, the Kingdom of Lesotho, the Kingdom of Eswatini, and Namibia. And so when we put this together, it covers all 4 countries. And we've had to deal with what the pieces of legislation say in the different countries, and these are the acts that we've consulted. In our territory, when we say child, according to law, it's a person under the age of 18. Now, let me just touch briefly on this. As much as this is a child is a person under the age of 18, there is also an issue of sexual consent. And you'll find this particularly in South Africa and in Namibia, where the age of sexual consent is 16. In other words, a 16 and 17-year-old can consent to having sex. But this is the decision we've taken in the SAU. And we've taken this decision in consultation with the SID, that anyone who is involved sexually with someone who's 16 and 17, who we consider to be a child, even though that person may have, that child has the right to give consent to sexual activity, we will still deem you unfit to work with children. So you can't come and say, but in my country, in South Africa, I can have sex with a 17-year-old and you're a leader in youth ministries. We will consider you unfit to work with children because that's a child. The fact that the law allows a child to have sexual consent, in youth ministries, we do not want to have a situation where our leaders feel they have at liberty to have sex with children. So understand that as much as that is there, that a child is a person under the age of 18, for purposes of functioning within youth ministries, you stay away from people under the age of 18, even though South Africa and Namibia will allow you as a 16 and a 17-year-old to give consent to sex. In youth ministries, that makes you unfit to work with children. Yes, it may be legal, still unfit to work with children. So that's not one of the things you want you to understand. Now, abuse, when it comes to a child, someone who's under 18, it means any form of harm or ill treatment deliberately inflicted on a child. Harm or ill treatment deliberately inflicted on a child. And these are some of the things that it includes. One, it will include assaulting a child. Now, you may think that assaulting is a big thing. Assaulting, you'll find that will range from shoving somebody, slapping somebody, hitting somebody. And sometimes we think these are appropriate ways of disciplining children. That stuff is a crime. You may end up behind bars, and we will do prison ministry to you or correctional services ministry. But that's assault. That's assault. So don't think that because that's how we were disciplined when we were kids, that stuff is legal. It's no longer legal, and the church will not stand with you on that one. So assaulting a child or inflicting any other form of deliberate injury to the child, that's abuse. Sexual abusing a child or allowing a child to be sexually abused, yep, that's abuse. Bullying by another child, that is abuse. So it's that story of kids are kids. Yes, it's true, we grew up being bullied and so on, but that stuff is abuse now. A labor practice that exploits a child. Now, sometimes we try to do these things as form of punishment. It's a very, very thin line, very, very thin line. So we don't involve children in labor practice that exploits them, particularly if it is something that you are saving money on by getting the child to do. Exposing or subjecting a child to a behavior that may harm the child socially, physically, psychologically, emotionally, including intimidation or threats. And sometimes we do that, particularly the part of intimidation and threats, we do that. And sometimes we mock children. Sometimes we insult them in front of other children. Sometimes we humiliate them in front of other children. Now, this is harming the child psychologically and emotionally. So we do it because sometimes it was done to us. Sometimes we feel that we can insult a child into stopping inappropriate behavior. Even when we do our child discipline things, when we are training as master guides, we know we shouldn't be doing that. But sometimes we do it. And I need you to understand that from a legal point of view, that stuff is abuse. It is abuse. Depriving a child of his or her rights to basic conditions of living. Exposing or subjecting a child to a social, cultural, or religious practice which is detrimental to his or her well-being. Now, the fact that something you consider something religious does not mean that it is always appropriate to expose children to it. You always have to check if something that we're exposing our children to or subjecting them to is good for their well-being. Exposing the child to mental or physical neglect. Now, that usually this will play a role for those people who are caregivers of children, because we don't usually spend that much time with children to be able to move into that space, as much as it is still possible in a short space of time. But usually for people who are taking care of the children as caregivers, that will apply more to them. Abandoning or leaving a child without visible means of support. Yes, also this applies to people who are dealing with kids. And even when we are camping, going out with children, this can apply to us. So we must always make sure that children have visible means of support when we are with them, particularly when it comes to camping. Subjecting a child to harmful substances such as alcohol and drugs. Sometimes we have young counselors who feel that they can do mischief with the kids. That stuff is abuse. You can't do mischief and be drinking and smoking and doing all those things with children under 18s. You can't do that. Sexual abuse in relation to a child, someone who's under 18. Now, I understand that people can now talk about the 16 and the 17-year-olds. It doesn't apply yet. In youth ministries, we will deem you unfit to work with children if you're going to do these things with those who are under 18, even though the law may let you escape in South Africa and Namibia. Sexually molesting or assaulting a child or allowing a child to be sexually molested or assaulted. Sexually molesting a child. Now, I want this to be very clear that you can't have a 15-year-old girlfriend. You can't. You can't have be touching up and kissing and doing things with someone who's underage. That's statutory rape. You're molesting the child because the child does not have the capacity to give consent. They don't. So some of these things, I know some people have given the argument, no, we were having a relationship, we were dating. You're not dating someone who's underage. It's one way. It's one way, and the law's going to sort you out. And the church, we're not going to be involved in covering up a crime because you thought you had a relationship. So please, there shall be no molesting or assaulting a child or allowing a child to be sexually molested or assaulted. Doesn't work. Including encouraging, inducing, or forcing a child to be used for sexual gratification of another person. Yes, and sometimes you do this, and in camping setups, we go on camporees, we go on fairs, we go on camps with these kids, and you find that there are these nice little girls there, and you like the way they sit, you make them walk up and whatever. When it turns out that you've used these kids for sexual gratification, that is sexual abuse. You can't come and argue that I didn't do anything to the child. Using a child in or deliberately exposing a child to sexual activities or pornography. Now, you can't expose a child to sexual activities. I remember there was a case we were dealing with where the person's argument was that we only kissed. We only kissed, and they were talking about an underage child. We only kissed. We didn't do anything. We didn't go beyond that. That is a sexual activity. Stay away from having those things with children. Pornography, you can't be showing child pornography. You can't be sending child pornographic material. Sometimes we think that pornographic material is only photographs and videos. Sometimes we have these short stories and novels that are pornographic. Stay away from those things. Do not be sending children those things. Procuring or allowing a child to be procured for commercial sexual exploitation, or in any way participating or assisting in the commercial sexual exploitation of a child. Now, this is like serious professional stuff. If someone is going to be paying you or rewarding you to have access to a child sexually, are you going to prison? When we will visit you there and pray with you and pray for your family. That is sexual abuse. Now, this is an interesting thing when it comes to caregiver, because particularly I want to hear this is a carryover in one of a country. It's not really a South African thing, but I've seen it a lot when you look at the act in Namibia. But their understandings of a caregiver, there are certain responsibilities you'll end up picking up because of this kind of relationship. Any person other than the parent or guardian who factually cares for a child and takes primary responsibility for the day-to-day care of a child. Now, that's a caregiver. Now, you would expect that that's a person who lives with a child, like a foster parent or a relative who's taking care of the child, or a primary caregiver, or a person who cares for the child with the consent of the parent or guardian. For example, when we say, can you watch over our children for the weekend? You are a caregiver. And then there are laws, and the law will expect you to take on the responsibilities of a caregiver. Now, do you see how that happens when the parents allow us to take their children to the camporee or take their children to a camp for that weekend? We are caregivers, and we have responsibilities of the caregiver for that weekend. For the time period when the parent has given you authority over their child, the parent comes and drops the child at Pathfinder practice on Sunday morning, and they leave the child with us for 2-3 hours. At that time, you are the caregiver. So a person who cares for a child while they're in temporary safety, that's not really us, or a facility or head of a shelter, that's not us. What usually takes, where we can apply is the person in number 4 who cares for the child with the implied or express consent of the parent or guardian of the child. Now it means that when there are certain responsibilities we should that are supposed to be meted out by fulfilled by a caregiver, when the child is with us, we are that caregiver. Now, a family member. Now, this is a very interesting thing. Family member, and we found it when it came to the Namibian thing. Now, the reason why it's important for you to know it is because when the SAU, it covers it, and our courts have a way of borrowing from one another when dealing with tricky cases. So just to be safe, it's very important that we cover it so that you know it. A family member in relation to the child is a parent of a child, yes. Any other person who has parental responsibilities of a child, yes, that may not be us. A grandparent, step-parent, brother, uncle, child, aunt, cousin of the child, yes. Now, this is the interesting thing, number 4. Any other person with whom the child has developed a significant relationship based on psychological or emotional attachment, which resembles a family relationship. Sometimes these children develop a personal relationship with us, a significant relationship that is based on psychological and emotional attachment. And sometimes these relationships, these children, they will talk about how they consider us our parents. Now you'll find that in Namibia and South Africa, the law does have this expectation that when we have this connection with children, we'll find that this is my father, this is my mom, oh mtanam, oh my child, aha! then there are certain responsibilities that come with it. So you can't simply say, no, I'm not a relative, therefore some responsibilities don't fall on me. When we build and develop those relationships with the children, we have a relationship akin to that of a family relationship. So there are certain responsibilities that come with it. Now, exploitation, when it comes to a child, any form of slavery or practice of slavery, including bondage and forced marriage, that will probably not apply to us. Servitude, forced labor services, that should not necessarily apply to us, because there is no way we should be exposed to children that way. Child labor, yes. Removal of body parts, that is not us. That is not us. Now, but this is what's important that you need to understand. Exploitation of a child occurs when advantage is taken of the child's innocence, naivete, need, or immaturity, contrary to the child's best interest and well-being, for the benefit of the exploiter. Now, let me explain this. When you, as a leader or the adult, are taking advantage of the fact that the child is innocent, a shame they do not know that. You know, as you grow older, you get to understand that when a guy says, come to his room, he wants to show you something, you get, your antennas quickly shoot up and you think, something might be happening. But a child is not going to know that they're still innocent. When you take care of a child's innocence, come sit here, sit on top of me, oh, my child, and here you are with this girl that you are taking care of as a leader in the church, and you are male and the child is sitting on your lap. You're taking advantage of a child's innocence. They are naivete, you know, the children are naive. They tend to think that everything and everyone is innocent, and everyone is what they seem to be, what they say they are. When you take advantage of that, or take advantage of the fact that the child has a need for food or money or transport or safety, because sometimes we take advantage of people's need for safety, you know, and they end up they end up in compromising situation. I remember reading a post where this guy was talking about on Facebook, where the guy was talking about how he went out with this girl. They went to a club and he took him to his place and tried to have sex with her, and she said no. And then he said around 2 a.m., fine, if you don't want to have sex with me, then leave. He says he knew that it was at that time, there is no way she's going to be afraid to leave. And so she ended up consenting to sleeping with him because she was afraid to walk. Now that's taking advantage of someone's need for safety, and that's coercion. Now, how that works out in the court is a different story, but that's taking care of someone's need for safety. So sometimes people do this because they're hungry, they're safe, they're scared, and all that stuff. Or if you're taking advantage of the child's immaturity, that is exploitation. When you're doing it, and whatever you are doing is not in the child's best interest and welfare, but it is for your benefit. That is exploitation. Now, this is whether the reward for you is going to be financial, or it's going to be, you're going to receive a favor or compensation. The moment you benefit and it is not in the best interest of the child and the well-being of the child, now that is exploitation. Now, I'm hoping that we will not get to a point where we're involved in commercial sexual exploitation. That's just basically trafficking children or giving people access to children sexually. Child pornography is something that we because of phones and the things we send to children, sometimes we may not take it seriously. Any image, doesn't matter how the image is created. There are even cartoons that are pornographic that have a lot of sex and all of that. Any image, whether it's real or simulated, whether it's cartoon or real person, where the person who's being depicted here in this image, whether it's a cartoon or a drawing or any image, if the person engaging in the sexual activity in this image is under 18, that is child pornography. Now, whether you're going to say, no, this was not meant to evoke sexual feelings, it was art. Any sexual content or any image that is sexual in nature, it cannot include in the participation someone who's under 18 years. Now, if this person is describing this under 18-year-old who's engaging in an act that constitutes sex, that constitutes sexual offense. If the person in the image is engaged in an act of sexual penetration, an act of sexual violation, an act of self-masturbation, displaying the genitals of such a person in such a state of arousal or stimulation. In other words, if you're going to display the arousal of a child, they're under 18, that's child pornography. Displaying the genitals and anus of such a person, yep. Displaying any form of stimulation of a sexual nature of such a person's breasts, that's child pornography. Engage in sexual suggestive or lewd acts. Children don't flirt. If they're underage, they don't flirt. You can't say they were flirting, they were children. Engage in or subject to sadistic or masochistic acts of sexual nature. Yes, this is when people get beaten up and so on for sexual pleasure. Engage in any conduct or activity characteristically associated with sexual intercourse. So once you have a child in a picture or a story or a video clip, engage in any of these things or involved in any of these things, that is child pornography. You can end up in prison for that. So we can't be sharing that stuff with children, and hopefully we can't be having those things in our possessions as leaders in youth ministries. Showing or describing a person participating in or assisting in or facilitating another person to participate in or being in the presence of another person who commits any manner being involved in an act contemplated in these paragraphs. In other words, if you're going to come up with a story that is going to either show or going to describe this participation or helping other people to participate, or you're describing or showing someone who is watching other people or being involved, being in the presence of this child pornography being happen. Hey, this is tricky. Don't do that stuff. That stuff is criminal. Showing the body parts of a person under 18. Now, if showing these body parts of this child violates or offends the sexual integrity or dignity of this person, that's child pornography. You are in a serious situation. So please, let's not do that. Neglect in relation to a child is a failure of a person who is taking care of a child to provide for the child's basic physical, intellectual, emotional, and social needs. Now, to a large degree, this is for the caregiver, but for the time when the children are with us, whether it's on a Sunday morning, whether it's on a camp over the weekend, we have a responsibility to provide for the child's basic physical, intellectual, emotional, and social needs when they are with us, because we are taking care of them at the time. Now, this is a definition, and these definitions apply to a large degree to us as well here in South Africa. Now, when it comes to abuse identification, we know we are not experts in that, and we're not trying to make you an expert over one session of sitting here, but there are certain things that can make you go, when you see them. And we would like you to be aware of them and pay attention to them. Now, the list we've come up is not exhaustive, but it's going to help. Now, we've extracted this a lot from the World Health Organization. When it comes to physical abuse, and it's possible that you are not the one inflicting it, but the law, remember, once you are an adult, and particularly in South Africa, the Children's Act, and you are aware or you have reason to reasonably suspect that a child is being abused, you have a responsibility, an obligation by law to report it as the first adult who becomes aware of it. You have responsibility. Now, what is it that you are looking for? First of all, the physical abuse is the intentional use of physical force against the child. Remember, I said it starts with just shoving the child, or has the likelihood of resulting in the harm for the child's health, survival, or development or dignity. That's according to World Health Organization, is physical abuse. Now, this kind of abuse, physical abuse, it takes the form of beating, kicking, hitting, strangling. It can include things like burning, poisoning, or suffocating, or strangling. All of those things are examples of physical abuse. Now, when you as a leader dealing with children find that, man, this child has unexplained bruises or wounds, just what happened here? They're giving you some story that's just it's not adding up. You find that the child has some lacerations, abrasions, they have fractures. What happened to my child? They can't explain it. You find them with burns. What happened? They don't know. They have abdominal injuries, particularly when they're girls. They have bite marks. That is a sign. Those are physical abuse indicators. Now, you'll find that it's not enough to just see that. But when it's accompanied by behavioral signs like you find that this child does not want contact of, they're weary of adult contact, physical contact. And when other children are crying, you find that they're very apprehensive. And for those who are in teaching, who are in school, you'll find that the child is absent on Mondays. You find that, hey, this is it. And you're dealing with children and you find that, hey, in addition to some of these indicators, you are seeing that the child is lagging in terms of their emotional and intellectual development. And when they have to go home, they are frightened of their parents. They are unnaturally or uncharacteristically scared of their own parents or going home. And sometimes they may say that this is what the parents did to them. My mother hit me, my father did me, my grandmother did this. When they report some of these injuries by parents, or sometimes, as I said before, they've got the strangest, weirdest, unbelievable explanations for injuries. We usually have this thing where women will have a blue eye, and then you ask, what happened? They say, I bumped the door. There's no way you can bump a door and have an injury like that. Doors don't do that. So sometimes children also have these hard to believe explanations of what has happened, to how they ended up with these injuries. When you see those things, you have a legal obligation to go and report it. And we're going to talk about reporting later on. Sexual abuse, the involvement of a child in any sexual activity that he or she does not fully comprehend, and they are unable to give full informed consent to. Sometimes the law says they have the capacity to give consent, or some activity that the child is not developmentally prepared for. So now that is it. Now, when you look at the child and you find that this thing has happened, now you are here working with children, and you find that this child, particularly with girls here, and sometimes it happens with boys when they are also being sexually abused, particularly by other men, they'll have difficulty walking or sitting. They have bruises, they are bleeding in the genital or anal area. When that happens, it's a sign you should really look up as a person. They have sexual transmitted diseases. When a minor has sexual transmitted diseases, it's a sign that there's been sexual activity there. Most likely has been sexual activity, and stuff like that needs to be reported. This child has got torn, stained, or bloody clothing. When you look at them, just looking at it, you may feel something may have happened here. And they report that they have pain when they're passing urine. I remember seeing a photograph sometime during the week of two 12-year-old girls taking a picture there proudly or boldly. I'm not even sure if it's proudly at this stage, but it seems as if they were both pregnant. Now, when a 12-year-old is pregnant, there's been statutory rape. Theoretically, because a 13-year-old could make them pregnant, and it's not yet statutory rape when two minors have sex. But it's something that we have to look into. You take the child for camping and there's bedwetting, and sometimes they soil themselves. Yeah, those are usual, some of the signs that there may be sexual abuse there. And when you watch them, some of the behavioral signs is that some of the kids are just unwilling to change for physical activities. You tell them that we are going to change now from class A uniform to field uniform. They're shy, that they don't want to do that. They're shy, they are reserved, they are very abrupt in their personality change. And sometimes you find that they were bubbly children, they've all of a sudden become withdrawn, and they behave like children way below their ages. Very, very childish behavior. Sometimes those are behavioral signs that something has happened. And sometimes these kids have inappropriate sexual acknowledgement. You find that, this child is too young to know this thing. But what is accompanied by the things we listed above there, it's a reason for us to pause and wonder that something may have happened. Or sometimes you have this child who's engaged in seductive behavior. They're behaving like an adult woman, who's trying to seduce a man. It's true that kids have crushes on their teachers or adults around them. Yes, that's not it. And you should remain the adult in situations like those. And sometimes they layer up in terms of clothing. And it's because they're trying to cover something up. Sometimes they're trying to cover pregnancy or wounds or bruises. And sometimes they just have poor peer relations. They don't get that well with kids their own age. And sometimes they masturbate a lot. They may have learning difficulties at school. Sometimes they attempt suicide. And in instances like those, we need to speak to someone, and the laws highlight the people that can be spoken to. Now, when it comes to neglect of the child, now remember, the indication here is, to a large degree, this applies to people who are taking care of the child. But when we are with the child for a camporee or a camp, or they are with us for the weekend or for the day, we kind of get to be the ones who must make sure that we don't neglect the child. Now, are there indicators of neglect? Yes. When the child is always hungry, they always have poor hygiene, yeah, there's most likely that there might be neglect there. They're always falling asleep in class. They always have fatigue. They arrive either very early for a program, and they want to leave very late. They're trying to spend as much time here as against being at home. No, there are physical problems that are not being attended to. Sometimes it's misbehavior. We deal with this issue. Sometimes it's misbehavior, and it's not misbehavior. It's just an indication that the child is neglected somewhere. Sometimes they'll tell you that there's no one to take care of them. Why don't you go home? And there's no one at home. There's no one to take. And you realize that, yeah, this child is being neglected. And their personal cleanliness is also in question. And you'll find that some of the signs, in addition to this, the children will be withdrawn. You know, they will have all kinds of disorders. They won't be doing well, generally in life, even at school. And you'll find that they start stealing food, they start stealing money, they are always begging, they have anxiety, they always want attention, and some of them can even be depressed. So you look at these, and when you connect them, you can have a reasonable suspicion of neglect. Remember, we are not social workers, we are not psychologists, we are not therapists. So this is just to give you some idea, to say maybe there's something here, and you may need to talk to somebody about it. There's something called sexual grooming that we need to just touch on when it comes to this, because we are dealing with children. Many people, by the time they sleep with a child, they've groomed the child. Now, what is it? It's a process where a child is slowly made willing or coerced to give consent to sexual acts. I remember watching a program, a documentary, that was talking about how some people have groomed children for sex. And this guy was talking about how he used to do it as someone who used to groom children. And he was saying that what he used to do was he would play a tickling game with children. Now, he was doing it with boys. This guy was doing it with boys. He says he would get very close to them and be very protective and you know, in a non-sexual way. And then the child gets comfortable with them as an adult. They play, they joke together. And then he says that they would then play a tickling game. And then he says, you need to tickle the other person so that they don't laugh, or, you know, and see if they can stand still and not move or flinch when they are being tickled. So you start tickling the neck and whatever. So it says over the time, you start with safe spaces like under the armpit and so on. And then he says, you know, by the third or fourth time you're playing the tickling game, and the child is there, they are sure that you're going to go for the usual places. And then you say, how can I make you jump, you know, and move and flinch? And then you start with the usual things, and the child is there being tough, and then they try and tickle you too. And then he says, and then you go and touch their genitals. But because this is a tickling game, and the child thinks that this is about them trying to remain unmoved or unfazed by what you are doing, the child will probably may flinch initially, like, you lost. And the child may, in their mind, start thinking, okay, next time you do that, I must try not to move. And then you say, okay, it's your turn. You try and tickle me in places. And you also, and he says, I would also hang in there and not move whenever he touches me. And once he touches neck, armpits and stomach, and I don't move. And the child will then realize that when he touched my genitals, I moved. Maybe I should touch his. And he says, more often than not, the child would then go and touch my genitals, and I also move. And then I have rewarded the child in knowing that when he touches there, he wins the game. Because for the child, it's a game. But for me, I'm making it normal for me to touch his genitals and he to touch mine. That's grooming. That's grooming, preparing the child for it. So you develop a relationship and you do that. Others will say that sometimes you'll have you're close to a child and you leave a pornographic photograph somewhere or something on your phone, and the child You tell him, go find something on my phone, what number there? And the child opens the phone. Children are curious. They end up going to photographs. They see something there. And you look, don't look at this thing. Yeah, you are too young to know. You can't handle this thing. You say it jokingly, but there's no firmness as an adult. And the child knows that. And then, can I see your phone? And you tell them, yeah, you're going to go to the pictures there. When I be careful there. You are making the child used to the idea that you can expose them to sexual contact, and you're normalizing. That is sexual grooming. Now, when it comes to that, some have gone to the extent of taking, pictures, naked pictures of the child, or sharing naked pictures of themselves. Grooming children, preparing the child or coercing them to give sexual content, that is grooming. And that's part of sexual abuse. So here I'd like to say, it's important as you go through, you will get this handbook for the course. Go through it and do some more reading. We're just trying to understand what these things are. And it's important that we know what these things are. And the reason why we spend so much time on the definitions is so that we just understand what it is that we should avoid, and what it is that we see somebody else doing that we should know this is abuse and it should be taken care of, because it's a crime. As a church, we deal with sins, the state deals with crimes. Now, boundaries and limitations. It's true that we have to sometimes visit the homes of the children. We do. Sometimes we have to go visit the parents of the child when we are trying to get the child to be part of the club. Yes, we do that to get the parents involved. We visit their families at the beginning of the year. We go into the counselor will sometimes, because remember our clubs are supposed to be broken down into units. Counselors will go and introduce themselves to the parents of the child to say, I'm the child's counselor. If there's a problem of discipline with the child, yes, we visit the child's home. We advise, take a second person. Use the 2-person policy when you're going to visit a child. Make arrangements and make sure that the parent of the child is there. You don't go do a home visitation with a child alone and the child is there alone. You don't do that. So you're there, you're visiting the child with their parents at home. Now, the reason you may think, but I'm not going to do anything. Child protection, this policy is designed to do 2 things. And some of the things are designed to do 2 things. They're designed to protect the child, and they're also designed to protect you against possible accusations. If there's a second person here, you have a chance. But if you're going to explain that you went to visit this 14-year-old in her home, it was just you and the 14-year-old and nothing happened. Do you know how hard it is for people to believe, particularly when the child says something happened, or when a neighbor says something happened, or when a parent says something happened, and you are here saying nothing happened, it was just the 2 of you in the house and nothing happened. Yeah, next thing you are going to say the devil is messing you up, and yet you did not take simple precautions. So please use a 2-person policy when you're doing that. When it comes to sharing of personal details, please, when we're getting children's phone numbers, children's addresses, and all of those things, it should be for official purposes, through official channels only. When they are going to be part of the enrollment form and so on. The idea, and if you're going to have the child's numbers on your phone, ideally it should be the communication is in the group, your Pathfinder club group, parents group, or whatever. The one-on-ones are what usually gets us in trouble. So we're advising. So please just make sure that is happening. That information is not really asked and sought outside of those channels. Now, we have had people, adults, who have used their position of being leaders in youth ministries to gain access to particularly young girls' phone numbers, young girls' contact details, and they have their own contact on the side. Please don't do that. Now, when it comes to methods of communication, to a large degree, please, because we're dealing with children, communicate with the child's parents. Do so. If you can, do not. If you're dealing with children, don't be their contact on Facebook or wherever. Why? You may say, but that's where they are. You avoid, because there's an issue of DMs, direct messaging, that happens between you and children, and all kinds of things happen. And remember that when a third person listens or reads a direct message, a text message that is privately sent between you and a child, particularly when it's sent at awkward hours of the night, it has a look of suspicion. A person can justifiably and reasonably think that you're doing something. And this is the rule of thumb we would like to suggest to you. If any comment or conversation thread or discussion between you and the child, no matter how innocent you were, but if a third person looking at it could say, no, but you shouldn't be talking like this with a child, avoid it. Avoid it. Because to come up and say, but you don't understand the nature of relationship, you can't have that kind of a relationship. You can't. It's going to be very difficult for you to understand. So we would like leaders in youth ministries to be involved in ethical communication with children. Now, the church manual in safeguarding children has a number of measures it would like to put in place. The first one is the two-adult policy. Whenever we're dealing with children in our classes, we're taking them to the toilet, whenever we're going to be with a child, make sure there's a second person there. Make sure there's a second person there to avoid, to assist you against possible allegations and for the protection of children. Also, because remember, the people who do get to mess with children want to be with these kids alone. So try to make sure there's a second person. Even if somebody else says, I'm just going to take the child to the toilet, send a second person. There's a second two-adult policy. This two-adult policy, apply it even with people you don't suspect. Insist on it even when you are the one taking the children to the toilet. Why? Because you do not want to have a fight over, you took the child alone, why should I be with a second person? You know, you just make it a rule, a general thing, excuse me, that everybody applies, because we do not want to create openings for people who are predators to have access to children. The second one the church manual talks about is the open door policy. The open door policy is that if you are unable to have a second person in the room, if you are unable to have a second person in the room when you're dealing with a child, make sure that there is either a second person standing at the door or the door is wide open, and people can pass by and see it. The church manual then says volunteer screening. Elected, appointed leaders, staff, and volunteers shall undergo clearance with the relevant authorities as per the country's laws and regulations, as stated in the background check section below. The church manual requires that we have volunteer screening. Youth ministries require that we have, and they are called background checks in our policies. And the third one, the next one is the 6 months policy. When you move to a new church, move to a new area, or we vote you into membership, or you've just been baptized into the church, that we should wait 6 months before we let you work with children. 6 months. And in that 6 months, the background checks can be done, and you can take the course and so on. But 6 months, don't just jump in and say, he says he's a master guide, she says she's a master guide, or we need someone, the person just arrived in August, in September, and then you are electing them in October to serve in youth ministries the following year. No, 6 months. So let them sing there in church for 6 months and before they can come and work with children. Training. The people who are going to be working with children must attend a child care and protection course, which this is it. This is what it is. Now, the SAU policy talks about precautionary removals. Precautionary removal says that when there's an allegation that you have had inappropriate conduct with a child, there's been an offense against a child, you are being accused of this. Now, the SAU policy says, whilst we are checking out the allegations, you need to step down from your positions of leadership and responsibility. Now, these include, but they're not limited to these, leading out in worship. Now, even if you are a song leader in your local church, or you lead out, you do devotions in your club or wherever, step down from those things. Preaching, just until we've resolved the matter up. Teaching and representing the church. Now, you may wonder, why all of this? Because when there's been an offense against a minor, and you continue to do these things, it's as if the church is choosing you over the victim, number one. Number two, it continues to give authority to what, not just you, but what you have done. That is, if you have actually done it. Now, people always ask, what happens if you have been falsely accused? We understand that could be happened. Hence the disclaimer. We understand that not all allegations are true. Now, someone can ask, if you understand that not all allegations are true, why then would you insist that I have there's this precautionary removal, that I step down from my positions of my responsibilities of leadership? Why can't I be innocent until proven guilty? We are saying you are innocent until proven guilty, but in this case, we don't know if the thing is true or not. We are choosing to err on the side of the child. We could err on your side and say, continue, and we will act when you are proven to be guilty. Or we could err on the side of the child and say, just step down temporarily. And then if you happen that nothing has happened, if you happen to not be able to prove that this thing has happened, then you can continue with the thing. It's a choice that the church is making. We are choosing to err on the side of the child. So we are not finding you guilty. It's just that we have an option of erring on one of the two sides. We are choosing to err on the side of the child. So this is why we are requesting that precautionary removal. Now, the General Conference, particularly when it comes to your youth ministers and club ministry training, requires that we sign a youth ministry volunteer code of conduct when we are going to work with children, young people within youth ministries. So we have it, and we are going to request people to sign it, because you are now committing that you are going to behave in a particular way. What happens when children have a crush on you? What happens when a child has a crush on you? Because it happens a lot. Children will have a crush on you, particularly those who may be 13, 14, even younger, 13, 14, 15. And in this case of youth ministries, 16, 17. What happens when they have a crush on you as an adult? And this is what we want to say. We need you to be the adult and not treat the child like a peer. Treat them as a child. And if you're treating them as a child, it means that you are going to make it clear that the behavior is inappropriate. They are a child, you are an adult, and you have no romantic interest in them as a child. And indicate that, look, if this thing persists, I'm going to have to talk to your parents about it. And if it does, do talk to the parent. So is it normal that children are going to have crushes on us? Yes, it's normal. So you don't make a big deal about it, but just be clear about the boundaries. You can't come and tell us that the child seduced you and you fell. Children these days, they look mature. They're children. They're children. And there are instances where the child may be doing. Remember, when you talk about sexual abuse, sometimes it's because the children have been exposed to inappropriate sexual content. That's why they're doing that, and they may need some form of professional assistance. But you remain the adult when the child makes an advance against you. Now, children in conflict with the law. Remember, there's a set, for example, children who are under, particularly those who are dealing with adventurers. At that age, children don't even have the capacity. They don't have the capacity to have the intention to commit a crime. They are too young to have the intention to commit a crime. But it sometimes happens that children are violent towards one another, that children get involved in sexual relations to children. And in instances like those, it's important that we find professional assistance to help us take care of this. And we do so this in consultation with caregivers. So before you jump and say this child raped that one, this child did this, involve the parents, the caregivers of the child, and let's see if we can get professionals to be of assistance in dealing with children, and particularly those children who can be in conflict with the law. So that's what we want to deal with there. Now, let's deal with background checks. Background checks are required both in our church manual and in our 2022 Master Guide manual. We're doing it. We voted in the SAU. People who are working with children shall undergo a background check. They're different background checks for different countries. Now, because Northern Conference is here, I'm going to touch on the different countries. In Lesotho, it's a police clearance. In Namibia, it's a police clearance. Eswatini is a police clearance. In South Africa, it's two things. I'm going to explain the two things. The first one is a police clearance, which is understandable. You go there, fill it in and do it. And the second one is a National Child Protection Register. Let me explain this one so that we can understand why we have a second one. There are instances where there's a case against somebody, but the person is not found guilty of an offense against a child. But the information that comes out during the course of the trial or whatever tribunal it is, the court is able to determine that, yay, this person is unfit to work with children. Yes, there is insufficient evidence to find them guilty of whatever charge is here, but then the court determines that the person is unfit to work with children. Now, in instances like those, you will not find that determination in the police clearance. You will find it in the National Child Protection Register. Now, the National Child Protection Register is free. It's obtainable from the Department of Social Development when you complete Form 29. So we are now saying in South Africa, it's those two things, the police clearance and the National Child Protection Register. If you have a criminal case, it will come up in the police clearance. If we're not found guilty of that, but the court found you unfit to work with children, your name will appear in the National Child Protection Register. That is the background check in South Africa. If any of the other three countries end up with something like the National Child Protection Register, we will add it as part of the background check. Now, will this add an additional inconvenience? Of course. Child protection is an additional inconvenience. When you try to protect your own family, there's an additional inconvenience. You end up getting alarms and all kinds of things. So this is it. That is the background check in our context. Now, people have fought about the background check for a number of reasons. One, they say it's costly. True, it is costly. We understand that. And we are hoping that's just one of the things we are going to bear the cost of because we're trying to protect children. The alternative is for us to say we don't want a background check because it's too costly, and in the process, the people who actually are a danger to children can go in through that crack and end up not undergoing a police clearance. So we understand that there might be a fee attached to it, and we are requesting that we bear it. We understand that it may take a while, a long time for us to get the police clearance. We understand, and we are requesting that we bear with the delay because the ultimate goal of it is to protect children. And we do not want children to be less safe because we do not want to go through the inconvenience. There are people who are not South African by origin, in the sense that they come from a different country, and a police clearance may even require that there be a checking, because for you to have it here, they may even need to link up with your home country. Please go through the inconvenience. Yes, it's an additional burden, but we are pleading with everybody who has to go through the process to absorb the inconvenience because we're trying to make youth ministries safe for children. We love the children, we work with them, we want them in the kingdom. And yes, the predators have come into the church and they're doing it in the church, and some of them are invested master guides, some of them are invested SYLs, some of them are ministers, some of them are elders. We have predators within the church, and we want to make the church safe. And this is a humble request that we just absorb the inconvenience. We absorb the sometimes there'll be additional costs that come with this thing. Let's please absorb this. Let's try and normalize it so that we can make the church as safe a place as possible. So we understand the inconvenience. We understand the additional delays. We understand all of those where they can be short-circuited, not short-circuited, but hastened, where we can do it expeditiously, let's do so. Where they can be expedited, let's do so. But please, we are requesting, let's absorb the inconvenience that comes with child protection, because it's going to make the church safer for children. We are really requesting it. So those are the police, the processes we have. Now, within our structure, our YCOM, we have now... Come again?
1 second. So people, Mfundisi, if you can please just be quicker on these 2 points, the role of the vice chair and also the reporting on child protection, and then we'll take questions. So people can start raising their hands now, as the pastor is going to give us an opportunity to take questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
All right. We've then decided that we've actually voted it at our special youth endowment to add amongst our vice chairpersons, to add a vice chairperson for abuse prevention. So we already have a vice chairperson for different ministries. We have a vice chairperson for advanced leadership training, advanced leadership club, community services. We are adding a vice chairperson for advanced for abuse prevention. And this is basically what we want from this person. The vice chairperson for abuse prevention, their main role will be provide education and training on abuse identification, reporting, and prevention to our youth ministries, club leaders, and staff who work with children. So that's what we want you to do. This person is going to be the one who provides education and training. People will know how to report, how to prevent it, how to identify child protection. That's the function of the VC for child protection and abuse prevention. So that's it. And in addition to this, of this vice chairperson, we have also created the area coordinator for abuse prevention. So the abuse prevention area coordinator, we are going to shorten it and call them APEX just to make it short. We want these people to be area coordinators, and their job is to do what this vice chair is doing: go around advocating for explaining, educating people. This is what child protection is. This is how you identify abuse identification, to help people to deliver the course itself. This is how you report. This is how you prevent it. And we want them to be able to be champions of background checks, so that people, and assist people when necessary to be able to go through background checks. That's what we want from this. So we would want the different YCOMs to please elect your vice chairs for abuse prevention and go around in your different areas that you have, appoint APEX, abuse prevention area coordinators. That's what we have. And these people are going to work closely with your local church abuse prevention officers. Now, many churches don't have abuse prevention officers as required by the SAU policy for the prevention of abuse to vulnerable people. But on the youth ministry side, let's please set up your vice chair, and let's have our APEX. Now, reporting. When there are allegations of abuse of a minor, any offense against a minor, the law places an obligation to us to go and report it. And this reporting that is placed on us as an obligation is also backed up by our policy as a church. In other words, it's not just the law, but it's also church policy that requires us, when we have reasonable grounds to suspect that, hey, there seems to be abuse there, we need to go and report it. Reasonable grounds. In other words, we've looked at the things that you can see, indicators and the behavioral things, and think, here, I think there might be something. Now, you are not finding the person guilty. All you are saying is there's reasonable ground to suspect. Now, in South Africa, any correctional official, it's not us, dentist, homeopath, immigration officer, labor inspector, it's not us, legal practitioner, medical practitioner, midwife, minister of religion, that becomes me. Boom. Nurse, occupational therapist, physiotherapist, psychological, religious leader, that's you. Social service professional, social worker, speech therapist, teacher. Some of us are teaching in classes. That's us. So you find that all of these people, and then it says, who on reasonable grounds concludes that a child has been abused in a manner causing physical injury, sexually abused, or deliberately neglected, must report that conclusion in a prescribed form to a designated child protection organization, the Provincial Department of Social Development, or police official. The moment I, as a minister of religion, or you as a religious leader, look and have reasonable grounds to conclude that, hey, this child might be physically injured, they might be abused, sexually, physically, or neglected. The law says in South Africa, the Children's Act of 2005, you must report that, not may consider, must report that, either to the Department of Social Development or to a child protection organization, some child protection organizations you may know in your area, or to a police official, must report it. If you go to the Department of Social Development, that is Form 22. Form 22. Now, that's a Children's Act. The Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act says any person, you are the any person who has knowledge that a sexual offense has been committed against a child must report such knowledge immediately to a police official. Do you know what this says? It says that you can't, once you know the thing, you can't say, I'm going to discuss it with my elder. The law requires you to report it to a police official. The moment a 14-year-old is impregnated by someone who's 20-year-old, 19-year-old, or whatever, who's older, you report it to the police. Don't sit down and say, we're going to discuss this in a family or what. You report it to the police official. B of the Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act 2007 says, a person who fails to report such knowledge as contemplated in paragraph A above is guilty of an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine or to imprisonment for a period not exceeding 5 years, or to both a fine and such imprisonment. So the moment you decide we are going to discuss it in a church board and you don't report it to a police official, you're opening yourself to a liability where you could be convicted, you could be fined or imprisoned. So do not think that sexual offenses against children can be discussed in a church board. It's a crime. Take it to the police, report it there. This is what the church is saying. Churches, take it to the police. Don't say we'll discuss it as a family. Take it to the police. This is any person. The same applies when something has happened in the family and you discuss and you decide we are going to discuss it internally and not embarrass the family. Take it to the police. The moment it comes up that you knew and kept quiet, you could find yourself in prison for a period not exceeding 5 years with a fine or a fine or imprisonment. Please, 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 please do that. If you wish to remain anonymous, you'll be treated as anonymous. It is important that in the period, the physical, emotional, and psychological well-being of the child is given priority. While you are reporting this thing, that thing must be given priority. Now, as leaders and staff members of youth ministry clubs in South Africa, we fall under Minister of Religion and religious leader. That is us. That is us. The law in South Africa compels us to report. Let us not deal with crimes in the church. In church, we deal with sins. All crimes must be reported to the state. All right, that's where it comes. The rest here is what the other countries require, but that's as far as we can here. Now, remember, our opportunities, our roles that we can play as a church. Please, when we go and report, when these matters have been reported, Tina, we provide support to the victim and to the alleged perpetrator. By support, I don't mean we're backing their stories up. We are there to provide spiritual support because we are the church. That's what the church can do. We're not taking sides. The church can provide spiritual guidance to both sides. We're not taking sides. We're just making sure that someone is able to provide support for the families. Because the family of the victim is going through a difficult time. The family of the alleged perpetrator is going through a difficult time. We will pray with them. We will visit them and so on. But we are not going to go into the details of the case. And we are not going to try and force reconciliation and forgiveness. That is not our job. Because this sometimes we have added to the pain and the trauma of the people because we have tried to guilt them into forgiving a perpetrator and make sure that we try and squash the crime. Do not be involved in out-of-court settlements. That's not our function. Our function is to report, provide support. This is why we have prison ministries in the church. And in addition to that, we advise, this is from the union policy now, that we find families who can be able to, this family go and minister to that family of the victim, this family go and minister to that family of the alleged perpetrator. Don't get into the details of the case. You are there to provide so they know that we have not thrown them away. That is what we are proposing. So this is basically what it is. And we want to make sure that all cases that come up are kept strictly confidential. Now, you'll find that the confidentiality is very important, and this is the Youth Ministry Volunteer Code of Conduct. This is it. Everyone is going to sign. You are committing to provide appropriate adult supervision for the children you are responsible for. You have at least one adult to help you in supervising children. that you're going to ask the child's permission before you ask them, just to make sure that the child is not, and if the child is injured, you'd make sure that another adult is there, that you are going to refrain from physical and verbal attacks and corporal punishment, which are inappropriate ways of disciplining children, that you are going to affirm children by appropriate hugs, brief hugs. And it's interesting that this child code of conduct, which is recommended by the new Master Guide curriculum, and they've extracted from the North American division, we voted it in the SAU, so it's part of our child protection code of conduct now in the SAU. They are recommending that when we are hugging these children, particularly the little ones, try a shoulder to shoulder, side to side hug, and when you're hugging them, even if you're going to hug them here, keep everything above shoulder level. And please avoid having children sit on our laps. This is something that is there. We are going to be aware of conducting activities in rooms that do not have viewing, that open door policy, and that we are going to cooperate with the volunteer screening process and complete this ministry volunteer information. And that when we are aware of these symptoms of child abuse, that we are going to take appropriate action. So this is the code of conduct that we are having, and we are going to sign it here at the bottom. So we are going to have an emergency contact list here that we recommend for your vice chairperson and the area coordinators. Just have them so that you can distribute and people know how to get this kind of information. So this is the course that we have in here. This is just additional information that you have from the different acts. So that is the child protection course, and I hope that at least gives us an idea on how to get started in the process. Dr. Nomaki, thank you very much. I'm now be able to take questions.
Thank you very much, Fundisi. There are 4 hands that are up. So this is how we are going to take the questions. We are going to have 3 rounds of hands. A round of hands means that we note hands, and if you pick up your hand thereafter, after all hands have been noted, you fall in the next round of hands. When you have your opportunity to ask a question, you will ask your question, and then you will wait for your answer, and you will mute after you've taken your question. So Mfundisi, I will help you to take note of the questions as they are being asked, and we'll take 2 questions at a time, and then you will respond, and we'll take the next 2 questions, and then you will respond. And that will be the end of the first round. So Nelisiwe is going to be first, Nokona is going to be second, Jacob is going to be third, and Helene is going to be fourth. And those are the hands noted for the first round. Should you feel that you want to raise your hand, you may. However, you will now fall in the next round of hands. Nelly? Oh, maybe you can't unmute. Hold on.
Thank you.
Empower you. There you go.
I'm fine. Thank you, Pastor, for that presentation. My question would be on your earlier discussion where you were talking about if you do something and the child feels emotionally abused or emotionally threatened. Now, I would like to understand where we can draw the line, because if we decide to, for instance, tell our children to do activities which are normal or chores, and a child will say, but I feel emotionally abused because you're asking me, for instance, to clean the plates. And this is not a child who is 5 or 6. Maybe this is a child who is 10 and above. And you ask them to do these chores, which we are trying to raise them to be responsible and to work. How do we balance? Because nowadays we are having kids that are using even normal correction as I'm emotionally abused, I'm going to report you. And parents are now having challenges in disciplining our children. How do we balance how to discipline, correct, and raise responsible children with the Child Protection Act, where we are saying if a child feels emotionally abused, that is a problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nelly. And O'Connor. Oh, the hands have been so okay. Helen is the next one. Helene.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mfundisi, for the powerful presentation.
Thank you.
Now, my question is on the issue where maybe a child, you made an example of a child maybe having a crush on you as a leader, maybe, and now you act as an adult, and then if maybe this thing persists or continues, then you tell the child that I'll have to talk to your parents about this. There are instances like those maybe, and then maybe it comes to that point where you have to talk to the parents. We deal with parents sometimes who are overprotective of their children, and maybe when you report that to the parent, then the parent tells you, no, not my child. You cannot tell me that my child has done that. There's no way that my child can do that. Then how do you deal with that? Maybe you'll end up now feeling like you are on the wrong when the child has really done that. So how do we deal with situations like that? Thank you, Pastor.
All right, thank you.
That's the second question, Mfundisi.
Is there a third one?
You
Or
may
we'll
deal with
do
those
it at a
two.
time?
Yeah?
All right.
Or
Let
you
me
want
start
me
with
to
this.
take the next two, then you deal with all four?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. Heleni, tech team. Natini Leleni. Vugan Labo. Heleni.
Good evening, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I have two questions.
All right.
The first question being that regarding the background check that needs to be done, the police clearance and the National Child Protection Register to graduate, quote unquote, to be a master guide, is it a requirement that we have these two documents? And then my second question is regarding the post as the questionnaire. I think earlier on, I arrived halfway through the seminar, so I did not get information on where to find that. So please,
To find what?
The document.
All right.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heleni. Jacob.
Thank you. Thank you. You took long to unmute me, Brother Ayan.
Balele, they are sleeping. It's not me. There is two tech team members here.
Okay,
thank you, Jacob. Go ahead, Baba.
Great. My questions are related, but they're just two. But I'm not sure if you're gonna blend them together with the last sister. The first one is I've been at Brixton. Actually, I'm Zimbabwean. I've been in South Africa for the past 16 years. And now it seems like it's a new requirement. What are we going to do in the churches as we sit in the nominating committee when we nominate a children's ministries leader who's not a master guide? Are we going to ask, or if I'm nominated and I'm not cleared, can I reject nomination? Tell the church that I'm not actually cleared with the child protection and all these clearances, or it's only for master guide? That's question number one. Or the clearance is only for master guide. You get that well. The second one is directed to my AC, Brother Ayan. I don't know if you're gonna help us, because the last time when we were by the last seminar, we had not a clear-cut way of how we are going to go about it according to the clearance. You said you were still working on it. So does it mean that we are now going to take this that has been given by the pastor, which is a good one, if I might not be in a position to get all my clearance by August, because August is when you are said we're going to be tested, and will we be able to stand a chance, or we just have to forget it? Because I want to know why, because we now have to make a decision. Weekend we're going for a camping skills camp, and we have already done almost everything. So we want to know whether it's still necessary to continue, or we have to do the this process first. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you so much. Go for it, Mfundisi.
Thank you. Let me start with the chores and emotional abuse for children. Thank you very much for the questions. They're actually very practical questions. They indicate that we actually deal with children and we are in youth ministries. Thank you for that. It's true that children try to run away from chores and all these other responsibilities and feign abuse sometimes, and sometimes actual real abuse. This is what I would advise, having dealt with children and clubs and parents for a long time. When we are going to do chores for campouts, for camporees and whatever, as part of your parents' meetings, present to the parents that we are going to have chores and these are the chores we are going to do. We're going to be washing dishes, peeling vegetables, this one, and discuss it and agree as parents that these are the chores that we are going to do. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is because when you have your parents meeting with the pathfinders there, and we agree this is what the kids are going to do, it helps you so that when the children come back and say, we were made to do chores, at least you have the child on the parent is able to say, but these are chores we agreed upon. You don't have a parent who's going to turn on you and say, but why would you make children wash dishes? So do that. That consultation is important. This is why in youth ministries, particularly junior youth ministries, it's important that we have parents meetings. So the different tasks and chores we give to children, it's agreed upon as parents, this is what we are going to do. And sometimes you'll find that the information sheet that you give out to parents, verbal will not always work, in the sense that write something down, explain these things, give them the sheets of paper, type it down, put it on the WhatsApp group for everybody to see, have the discussions, so that it is understood that this was a chore that was being done by a club, that you are not necessarily individually targeting a particular child and so on. So that is what I would advise there, because it happens not just in terms of church and club. Children are crying abuse sometimes at home, sometimes at school and wherever. But the information ahead of time will help you. Don't spring it upon them at the camp, because you'll find that the resistance you get there when they call home crying and then paint a bad picture, sometimes it may be difficult to get the parents on board after the fact. But if you get the parents on board before the fact, and you are now able to say, hey, your child is giving us problem, they are refusing to do their chores, then the parent can also be able to assist you there. So that's what I would advise when it comes to those that emotional abuse. And it's true that it's becoming more and more difficult for people to abuse children. I was doing a seminar with a church where I was talking about our cultural way of disciplining children. The stick was right at the end of the process. In other words, it was designed to be used very sparingly. But when you don't understand how children, we initially disciplined children within our context, within our African context, you are tempted to think that the stick was always the primary thing, and that the stick was really sparingly used when all these other measures have been used. So once you are able to take people through a process of saying, this is how we discipline children, the whole spectrum of it, you'll find that the stick is at the end, and most of the time you're not going to need it. But because people are not aware of the different ways in which children are disciplined, trained, you'll find that they think that in the absence of the stick, there's nothing else you can do, which means that in our club, part of what we can do for our parents is to have these seminars for them. Bring in somebody who can come and do a talk on them on how we discipline children, so that they can also be empowered on the different options they have as against just the stick. The second question has to do with children who have a crush on us. It's when a child has a crush on you, you talk to them. Look, you are a child, I'm older. And if persists, my advice would be bring in the counselor or a club director or somebody else within the club, and the three of you talk to the child. Why? Because you need to have some form of record. It's going to help you, particularly with children, parents who can be protective with their children. Some form of record. This has happened. I talked to the child. It happened again. The third time I spoke, I brought in a counselor. I brought in so-and-so to talk to the child, brought in the pastor, whatever. Now you're coming to the parent to say, hey, we've tried. It's not working out. And when you've had some form of record of that nature, you'll find that the response of the parent might be different. Also, you must remember, it's not always a question of being overprotective. we were kids, and sometimes you find that the mischief I did at school, I did not do at home. So the picture that my parents have, my mother had of me at home, because my father died when I was very young. The picture that my mother had of me at home, it was different from the mischief I did at school, So it's possible for children to be one person at home and a completely different mischievous person elsewhere. And so when the parent sometimes says, not my child, they're not being overprotective. It's just that this is not the version they experience at home. So it's good to have that kind of thing of saying, it happened, I talked to them, it happened, I talked to them, it happened, I brought so-and-so. We spoke to the child gently, kindly on a particular occasion. Keep a record on it so that the parent can know, good, hey, it's a problem. It's not just your word against them. So that would be my advice on that matter. Background check, is it a requirement to graduate? And I'm going to combine that with what happens with people who are going to be elected now, nominating committee. Is it only master guides, or everyone needs to be cleared? Whenever a policy is introduced in a church, and I'm going to cite this because that's what happened with the uniform story and the 30 plus that Pastor Kumar had mentioned earlier on. Whenever we introduce a policy in the church, we have a period where we educate. We are educating. This is the policy that is there. Educate, let us be know. This is that phase in, phase out period, that transitional period where we are telling people this is happening. This is what it is. This is the information. We are currently in that process where we are saying, where we are educating people. This is it. In other words, we do not expect that right now, because we voted this thing now, the GC, the policy is old, but we've brought in the child protection course and the background checks. We voted now in June. That's when we voted the background checks. So we do honestly know that by August, September, when nominating committees sit, we're not going to be able to have those things in place before then. We know that people who are being invested now will not have gone through those things. What we are saying now is this. This is the requirement that is going forward. It's going to happen. We are still in the process of educating people. And so we are asking you, start applying for your background checks. Those who are being invested in August, September this year, by that time you are invested, you probably would, even if you start applying now, you probably would not have gotten the response from a background check by then, but we're starting applying. Ultimately, where we are going to find a situation where either by 2023, 2024, where we are going to be saying people who are in youth ministries should be having these things. But whenever we introduce a program, it's never an abrupt thing of do it now, tomorrow we want it implemented. So now what we are doing is to say, this is the policy. We are going to, this is the background check required in our territory. So please start now, apply for your police clearance. We are asking what Brother Nomaki is doing now of taking us through the child protection course is part of this process of educating, introducing the process. Now we are going to start saying the next step will probably be the YCOM will elect someone who's going to be the vice chair for child protection. We are going to start helping people to get their clearances done. And it's a process that's not going to happen overnight, but we are introducing the process now. So those who are due for investiture now, you go ahead and be invested, it's fine. Those who are starting the new Master Guide curriculum, it is a prerequisite. In other words, you do it before you start training, prerequisite. So we are wanting you, go and do a background check if you're starting the new curriculum. Those who are training, who are finishing with the 2015 curriculum, who are going to be invested now, you'll wrap it up. But as time goes on, you will find that we're now going to even go to the churches and say, when we're electing people, this is what's required. But we are still in the information phase. This is the information. This is the information. This is the process we are going. This is the policy of the church. So I hope I cover that the background check is a requirement to graduate now, not for this current curriculum, but it's a requirement for those who are starting the new curriculum. Is it a requirement for the people who are going to be elected in the nominating committee now, not now in 2022, but we are hoping that by the time we do 2023, 2024, we will have fully embraced it and are able to implement it even at the nominating committee level. But once you are elected, we are asking everybody, once you're elected by the nominating committee this year, please go for your background check. You have the information, please go for a background check. We're trying to get everybody on board so that we make the church safe. So that's what I would like to say on those. I think I've covered the questions that were asked. Now, where can we find the child protection course? The child protection course, We are going to send, we had already sent the draft that I went through today. We had already sent it to the conferences in preparation for our special youth in Daba. So the conferences have it, but there were a few changes that we made at the youth in Daba, which we are incorporating into the final product that we are hoping that by the end of August, will be able to be available on our website. It will also be available at your conferences, and Brother Nomadi will be able to assist you with copies on it on the final product by the end of August. It's public information. We want everybody to have it, so it's not a secret document at all. But the one I presented today, conferences already have it. If you want it, you can get it from them. As I say, it's not a secret document. It's something that everybody has. From our side, we just want to add some of the changes that came up when we had our special youth in Daba. But that's going to be end of August. By end of August, it will be done.
Thank you very much, Mfundisi. Taken all the questions. Unfortunately, due to time, the hands that we have now up until Ruth, I'm going to mention names and I will finish off with Ruth. Those are the last hands. Due to time, we won't be able to take any more hands. Already, we are going to go slightly over time with the pastor responding. So we need to wrap up due to time. We're going to start with Owen, Sislindi, Shaya, Ashley, and then we finish with Ruth. If we may please stick to a minute in terms of asking our questions so that we can be able to have sufficient time for responses. Thank you very much.
I'm sure everybody can hear me now.
We can hear you, Baba, but speak a bit louder, closer to your mic.
Oh, okay, all right. I've got two things to say. Firstly, is a comment for the reporting. Thanks, Pastor, for the good presentation. It might happen that sometimes when we report the lying. As the leaders, we mustn't lie, because if we have the personal issues or the personal problems, we must sort it out on our own, because it may happen that we can report things that we don't have even evidence. That's that I'm supposed to say. My question is on the pastor talk on pornographic photos. Does our dressing does not encourage the pornographic issue in the youth ministry? That's my question, because nowadays our dressings encourages the pornographic. As we remember, our body is a den of our God. So how can we sort out this problem of addressing? Because sometimes it's the problem in our youth ministry. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, Sis Lindy. Is the tech team sleeping again?
No, I think they delayed a bit. Thank you, Chair. Let me start by thanking the pastor. What a powerful seminar. Thank you for the information. It's been very helpful in some of the issues that we deal with. However, I have two questions that I needed clarity on. The first one, it was very clear how we report sexual abuse as well as physical abuse. However, because verbal abuse or emotional abuse is not really falling under the criminal law or the criminal act, is there a form or any process that we need to follow when we are dealing with a verbal or emotional abuse? That's the first one. The second one, I think maybe we can ask the director to also equip our counselors. In this day and age, we're dealing with very aggressive children. I've had an incident where a child was very aggressive and disruptive in the class. And when the counselor was trying to restrain and hold back the child, it would have appeared as if he was being hard on the child. But
when doing the investigation, it became very clear that he had to restrain the child because the child was coming right in his space, right in his face. You know, he felt threatened by the child who was very aggressive. So maybe we need also to be equipped how to deal, because in this day and age, children are very aggressive. Whether you are in church or not in church, we have aggressive kids in the church. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shaya?
Thank you, Ayanda. Good evening, Pastor. I have a question. I've come into contact with a pathfinder that I
A
believe
bit
is still
louder,
under,
Shaya.
sorry, I say she's still under the age of 18, and she's just had her second baby 2 weeks ago. How do you allow a child of that age to come back into a club being under the influence of being a parent, if I could put it that way? Does that not influence other kids in some way? How do you handle a situation like that?
Okay.
Thank you. Ashley?
Okay, I hope I'm audible. My question
Very.
is, if there has been sexual abuse allegations against a counselor, but they never found solid proof, so they closed the case, does the club still have the counselor continue teach even after the allegations? And if so, if the parent of the victim requests to have them removed, is that valid enough for the director or the board to remove the counselor?
Thank you so much. Ruth? Tech team, uphi Ruth? Ruth khuluma phela. Bakuvulele. Ruth is sleeping. Okay, I think Ruth is having network challenges in Mfundisi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Ruth, we can hear you. We almost gave up on your network there. Speak, my sister, while you have a chance.
All right. All right. Evening, my reader.
Evening. Good evening. Good evening.
No, sorry, Ruth, my dear. Okay, no, sorry, Ruth. Tech team, please, you can close Ruth's mic. Apologies, Ruth. It's not working. It's not raining today. Rain is not coming. We apologize. Our sincere apologies. Mfundisi, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me start with the first question. I think that was by Owen about pornographic material in dress. One of the things that's interesting about dress is that today's dress has, not today, pornographic material is anything that can, if the people can help us with, I think there's someone talking in the background.
No, Ruth, we are struggling on the network. Don't worry,
All
we'll sort him out. Continue.
All right. The short answer is I don't think that dress contributes to pornographic material in terms of people watching it. But if you take a video or a photograph of these children and somewhat use it as pornographic material, then it is pornographic material. But the dress in and of itself is not. Now, is it true that some of the skirts are very short? Yes, some of those Pathfinder skirts are short, some of the AY skirts are short, some of the outfits are tight, and applies to guys as well. But the first thing I'd like us to deal with is, as adults working with children, I want us to change the mindset and not to consider children to be people who are our peers sexually, such that we can handle them with a sexual eye. We should intentionally, and not hope it's going to happen accidentally. We should be intentional in handling and be intentional in seeing them and treating them as children. Therefore, not open ourselves to the possibility that we could be sexually enticed by children, such that their dress could be pornographic. So that's what I would want to say. We cannot manage how parents raise their children. Remember, the church talks modesty. We're not going to prescribe lengths. The church talks modesty. But from our side as youth ministry leaders, I do not want us to have even the slightest impression that children could possibly entice us sexually, such that their dress could be to us something pornographic. So that's my response to the first one. The second one is other forms of abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse. In fact, that would even go to the question of neglect. Here, other forms of abuse which are not physical and sexual, which the police require, which the state would probably lean more towards the police station. Child protection organizations, which are children's NGOs, or the Department of Social Development, may be very helpful in these other forms of abuse, because they may not necessarily be something that will be handled by the police, but these other professionals are going to step in with the view to assist. So that's what I would like to say. Your local Department of Social Development, they have the social workers to be able to assist when it comes to not just verbal and psychological abuse and emotional abuse, but also when it comes to matters of neglect. That's what I would say. And thank you very much for the suggestion. The equipping of counselors to deal with aggressive children is something very important. There was something that was in the Adventist risk management document I read once when we were still preparing for a child protection course when I was still in the Cape Conference, and they spoke of an incident book. And when they spoke about this incident book, we were indicating that when you have a club, you must have an incident book, so that whenever there's an incident of an aggressive child or this behavior or children fighting, just write it down. Make sure that there's a record of them. Why? Because by the time a child is aggressive and right in the face of the counselor, sometimes you'll find that that may not have been the first instance. Something happened and you brushed it off and didn't take it seriously. But if you have some form of incident record that you keep in your club, you will find that it might help. By the time the child becomes that aggressive, that threatening to the counselor, it's part of something longer, then you are able to come and say, I restrained the child and it was not the first time. So it is important. And this is also the value of the two adult policy. Because if there's a second adult, there's someone who can corroborate what happened. So it is true that we must have those seminars on helping counselors on how to de-escalate situations, on how to deal with aggressive children, because these children are aggressive, rightfully, as you say, Cecily, they're not just aggressive in church, they're aggressive at school, they're aggressive at home, they're aggressive everywhere because of a number of factors. I'm not sure if it's Shaya or Shay who talked about a child who was under 18. Should the child come back to club? The child is under 18 and they're having their second child. We've had 13, 14-year-olds that have had children and they're still adventurer age group. What do? Do we bring the child back to the club because they're now a parent? They are a parent, but they're also still a child. There is an old fear that if one has a child and then they will influence other children to have children as well. And we've used that fear in the past, legitimately so. The fear was legitimate, but we've used that fear to try and isolate those kids. This is what I would like to say. When a minor has a child, and I'm assuming that the legalities have been dealt with of how a child ended up being pregnant, and hopefully there was no adult involved in statutory rape, but now we are dealing with the fact that this child already has a child. Does a child come back to club? And the short answer is yes. When children have children, it really messes up their lives. But unfortunately, they're not at the level of development to be adults. So yes, biologically they're parents, but they're not adults. They're children themselves. They still want to play. They still want, their stage of development does not automatically change and shoot up simply because they've given birth. So yes, bring them back to club. And it may be an occasion for us to be able to educate other children that, look, they embrace them, they're back, they're children in the club, and let them be able to find belonging in the church. So that's what I would advise there. Do not isolate them. Do not take them out of the church. Is there a possibility that somebody else may find this thing glamorous and try and do it? There's always a possibility that might happen. And that might happen even if the child is not welcome back to club and they're just coming to church. But now we do not, our responsibility to minister to the child, our responsibility to minister to the child does not end simply because the child now has a child. So yes, they still come back to the club. And sometimes the parents may be helpful if they're in the picture. Sometimes the parents are not in the picture. And sometimes you'll find that this child is a full-time parent, they're taking care of their own children. And you find that it's a complicated setup that you can't quite handle because it may need professional social workers to deal with. And it's good for us to refer them, to bring the social workers on board. But what I want to say to Shai or Shay, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, forgive me for messing it up. I would say that when that child comes to club, we continue to minister to them, because remember, youth ministries is age appropriate. So even though their life, social life and personal life may be a complete mess, we still are able to minister to them because we still have that responsibility to them as a church. Love them, love them. Those children need a lot of love. An 18-year-old who's got 2 children needs a lot of love, needs a lot of support, and needs especially a girl, needs a female who's going to embrace them and love them and be a source of tremendous support, because they're going to face a difficult life ahead of time. And the last thing they need in life is to be kicked out of a church ministry. So let's do that. But at 18, of course, they're not going to go back to Pathfinder. At 18, they're probably going to be an ambassador. They may not even be comfortable being an ambassador, but find them a space within the church where they can be embraced and can find a sense of belonging within the church. That's what I would advise. It's not an easy thing. Bring in a social worker to advise you as a club leadership, if you possibly can, on what the best thing to do in that particular case. The last question here was about what do we do? There's been an allegation probably of inappropriate behavior by a counselor. We investigated to find insufficient evidence. Do we continue with the counselor? Do we remove the counselor? There are enough grounds to remove the counselor. We work, and what if a parent requests that the counselor be removed from the club? What do we do? When we are elected to the church, okay, we all have members. We are all members in the church, and we should be treated fairly. But when we sit down to elect people who are going to lead, that is not only because you are a member. That also has to do whether we think that the function is going to be best performed by you. There are people who are members in regular standing, they are faithful in returning tithe, they come to church early, they are very helpful people. However, they have a temper, and we decide as a church, this one doesn't handle us well, they can't be an elder. Or we say this one, there's a lot of cloud, there are a lot of suspicions about this one, misbehaving with members of the opposite sex, we can't make them family ministries leader. Now, those are considerations we have in the nominating committee when we are selecting leaders. And it's not always based on evidence and tangible proof we have. It's sometimes based on effectiveness of leadership. So it's a responsibility of the club and the leadership of the church to say, is this person best placed with everything that is happening? Is this the best person to perform this particular function? Now, we may find that you're not the best person to be a counselor, but probably you can be a deacon. You may not be the best person to be a Pathfinder club director, but you can be something else. So those are determinations that you make as a club, not because, and those determinations are not always based on tangible evidence that came out of a case. Nominating committees don't deal with cases. They deal with, we don't think this is the best person for the job in this particular case. So I would say, whenever we've dealt with a situation like that, after you've done your investigation, found someone innocent or insufficient evidence, you still have a responsibility to then sit down and say, is it the best person to continue performing in this particular function? That's what I would advise you to do. And if you think that it's not best for the person to continue in that function, sit down and have a candid conversation with them and say, look, because of A, B, C, D, we think that it might be best if you perform a particular function as against this one. It's a responsibility you have as part of the leadership of the church to do so. because not to do so can actually be detrimental. So sit down and do that as a leader, as a leadership of the church, as a leadership team of the church, of the club, and even the church board, and come up with a decision that is in the best interest of the church and of the club. That's what I'll say to that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mfundisi. Very well informing, and we're very well educated. This subject is still fresh and new to a lot of us, and we'll continue to engage on it. We cannot exhaust it in one night, and therefore we will continue to engage as we learn in these things. We will make the documentation available to all, we will continue to engage in this subject. Delisani, come on the floor for announcements as we wrap up for the day. Thank you very much, Mfundisi. Your presentation is much appreciated. And we have a lot of questions that are also in the chat, and I want to apologize that we couldn't get to them due to time. And Noliolo also picked up her hand, which was lowered. Due to that, we won't be able to take any further hands. We do sincerely apologize, and thank you for your attendance. Delisani, announcements as we prepare to go. After that, I will ask Sister Amelia Furi, our VC for schools and community service, to please pray for us.
Thank you, my leader. Just a few announcements from my side. The first one, just a reminder to please complete the form. The form has been posted just now on the chats. This applies to PLAs, APLAs, councillors, everyone who attended this evening's seminar who would like to receive a certificate. Without completing the form, we won't be able to issue a certificate of attendance. So please complete the form, even if you just came to attend this seminar only. And then the second announcement that I have, from tomorrow up to Sunday, we will not have our seminars. This is due to the fact that some of our master guides are going out camping. They are doing camping skills over the weekend. So we'll resume again on Monday, exactly 6 o'clock. Please, let's be punctual. 6:05, the presentation starts. And then finally, some good news. I know plenty of people have been asking me and inboxing, asking when are these seminars going to be uploaded on YouTube? We will start uploading them this weekend. A big thank you to the tech team for doing that. And yeah, I think that's it from my side. May we all have a blessed evening. Vice Amelia, over to you.
Pastor, thank you for a precise and clear presentation. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you that you have brought us thus far. Thank you, Lord, that you have given us guidance and leadership as to what we need in leading your one to you. Dear Lord, we thank you for all the blessings we take for granted. We give you praise, we give you honor, and we give you glory. It is a privilege and it is an honor for us to getting this information. And I pray, Heavenly Father, that you be with the team that organized, bless them in a special way, continue to strengthen them. And we thank them, Lord, and we appreciate that in all these seminars. Bless pastors, every presenter that has offered up their time to share information with us. Lord, help us not just to attend for certificates or for stripes, but help us to implement these in our daily lives. Above all, I pray that you may use us so that we lead spiritual children to you, dear Father. There's many issues, there's many challenges, but we know, Lord, that you are greater than all of that. We ask, Heavenly Father, as we retire now, that you will forgive us of all our sins. We are filthy, unworthy vessels, that we come before you, and we ask for cleansing, and we ask for healing. What illness, whether it be physical, whether it be emotional, cleanse us and heal us so that we can be of better service to you, dear Lord. Give us a good night's rest and bless your children further. We ask these things through forgiveness of our sins. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
To follow Jesus, I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. The cross before me, the world behind me. The cross before me, the world behind me. The cross before me, the world behind me. No turning back, no turning back. Though no one joins me, still I will follow. Though no one joins me, still I will follow. Though no one joins me, still I will follow. No turning back, no turning back.
Exco, please remain. The rest kindly exit to avoid being removed. Thank you very much, Mfundisi. We want to thank you for your service.
Good morning, Northern.
Okay, those who are not in the Exco, please kindly exit. We need to talk about you. Hey, I didn't stop the recording. My goodness. Adam, you're gonna need to edit this one.